Good morning.
First off, I want to apologize. I have, yesterday I was at the office for half the day, no power. I charged up as much as I could from Robin Lemon's like extra little source thing. And then I've been chasing phone battery for the rest of the day. So, so this room, because I'm really hard to keep here, and if we miss something, please know that we'll be.
You're cutting in and out. Can't hear you. You're frozen.
Is that any better? No? Can you
Yes,
hear me?
yes, I can hear you. That's better.
All right, I'll stay right where I am. As I said, I'm out of battery, or I'm out of electricity and internet, so I'm doing the best that I can with cell signal. So wave if I need to go walk outside. I'm broadcasting from the Sheena Image studio here in my house, okay? All right, tell me some good news.
I have a closing today for one of the worst clients ever. So that's good news. And then we have 5 unexpected guests coming for the weekend because their power's out. So that's going to be fun.
Okay, my power is still out. They're saying I'll get it back on Sunday. So
Yes, that's what 11 o'clock on Sunday is what they said, or even Monday. So
even Monday. Oh my gosh. Well, I have a neighbor that's volunteered their couch and their Wi-Fi right around the corner from me. So I think that's where I'm going to be working today. Just a couple of, actually, let's hear some more good news. Congratulations, Kathy.
Congratulations.
thanks, Sean.
Congratulations.
Who else
That's
has
a
some
double.
good news?
I was brave yesterday. So I talked to some people that I didn't know. I reached out to a girl that I haven't seen in, gosh, I've seen her once in like a year. And we're going to have lunch next week. So I feel pretty good about that.
Nice. See, that's is that still okay?
It's rough, but it's okay.
All right, I'll go back to where I was. Congratulations, Greta. That's how this business works, right? It is simply more and more conversations, and then you see the results of those conversations. So that's fantastic. I was actually going to read you guys a couple lines. I'll do that in a second. I want to remind you that how important reading is, guys. I'm in the middle. I'm not proud of this, but I'm in the middle of like 4 different books right now. It's a mixture of being learning based and being ADD. So this is one that I am reading right now called Principles by Ray Dalio. This is a phenomenal book. Ray Dalio is one of the richest people in the country, and he's self-made. He made it through hedge fund investing. And he was one of the very first people to essentially analyze data through algorithms and all that kind of thing to make his predictions. And he's got some incredible ideas in this book. So anyway, today I wanted to focus a little bit on role playing. And since we did listing presentations earlier last week or this week, I was hoping that we could do a buyer presentation today. I did send a couple of private messages out to see if anyone wanted to be the buyer's agent today and give us a sampling of what that conversation might look like. Would anyone like to volunteer, or is anyone compelled to do a different form of role play today?
We haven't gone over the buyer presentation yet in Ignite. I'd like to see someone who's, kind of done that or had some experience. It'll be good because that's our next class that we're supposed to have today.
Oh, perfect. Okay. Do we have a volunteer? Kathy Ray, if we don't get a volunteer in like the next 10 seconds, I think it's going to be you.
I'm not prepared to be the agent because I'm looking at a little bit of chaos in my house. And I really thought I'm going to get on and I'm going to be there for a few minutes. And then I'm going to unplug my earphones and then I'm going to go do work while listening to what's going on. So I'm really not prepared.
Okay. Does that mean I'm supposed to wing it?
Yeah. Okay. I'll be the buyer.
Because I don't have my papers or anything in front of me. So I'm going on memorization. And I also haven't done one of these in a long time because Pam's taken every buyer we've had for the last 5 years.
I know. I mean, give me FSBOs and expireds. I'm happy to do that. But
all right. Well, we're gonna go through the buyer presentation. Okay. Not every stat that I say is perfectly accurate, but it's very close. Okay. Typically, I would have all those stats completely updated, and I got them pretty good. But if I say 34% and it's 36%, it's close. Okay. Okay. So let's do a little bit of backdrop here. In the Google Drive, there's a couple of forms that I think that you should become familiar with. One of them is called the buyer intake page or buyer intake sheet. That is a list of all of the, I wouldn't say all, but a good sampling of questions that you should be asking your buyer. Okay, these are questions that are not only about their desire for the experience, but also, of course, about their house. So you're gonna be asking questions like their motivation, where do you wanna go, when do you have to be there by, what's important to you about moving. You know, there's a good line that an old buddy of mine would say something like, hey, moving is pretty hard. What's got that on your radar, right? Because ultimately what's happening is they have decided to put themselves through a fairly high degree of stress, right? And a fairly high degree of having to be responsive and like it's fun, but it's also really overwhelming to buy a property, right? So the reason why they put themselves through that is because they see a particular advantage to doing so, whether it be a financial advantage to doing so or a lifestyle advantage to doing so. So it's critical at all times that we make sure that we are extracting their motivation from them and potentially using that throughout the process to remind them why they're putting themselves through this high degree of stress, right? So for example, when it's time for the lender to get involved and the lender wants this doc and this pay stub and this tax return and this letter of the gift money, and you're going to think that they're coming for your blood sample next. Okay. And maybe that'll be what happens in the future. For now, they don't require blood for a loan. Okay. Yet they're going to feel like they're getting harassed. Okay. So they're going to have to remind themselves, and you might have to remind them also of why they raised their hand and say they were willing to go through this in the first place. Does that make sense? Okay. So one texted last night. Okay. Let's do this. So by this time, I have asked these preliminary questions and I have booked an appointment. Okay. Author of the book, exactly where we can find the buyer intake sheet and chat after the huddle. Okay, just about every document that I mentioned in this room is either in the Google Drive or will be in the Google Drive within a couple hours. Okay, so for example, like the other day I said something and I uploaded it to the WhatsApp, and then later on in the day, and then I updated it to Google or to the Google Drive.
Is there any organizational pattern to the Google Drive, or is it just documents everywhere?
I would say that it is about 85% very neatly organized.
Okay. So I should be able to find like a buyer's. I guess
yeah.
You know, I spend a lot of time digging for stuff, and if I know exactly what file it's in, then I know I can bookmark it or store it.
So that one is in a document or a file called
Sorry, Aubrey's blowing me up. Okay, that one is in a file called intake sheets, and there's a seller intake sheet and a buyer intake sheet. Okay, there's also the email that I sent out on Sunday has 2 additional, I wouldn't call them intake sheets, but I would call, they're like pre-qualification sheets for both buyers and sellers. And that has kind of it's a lot of the same questions, but they might be stated in a slightly different way. I would familiarize yourself with both of those, the buyer pre-qual questions and the seller pre-qual questions. Okay, so I'm not get those
Can't hear you, Bill.
today,
Can hear you.
so I
Bill, we can't hear you.
catch everything. And what's that?
You're
We
breaking
couldn't hear you.
Let me see what I can do about this.
We're not outside real fast. Okay, is that any better?
Definitely.
Is that any better?
Yes.
Yep, that
Yeah.
sounds better.
All right. Okay, we're gonna do this outside. Let's see how it goes. All right, as long as the sound is better, the voice may not be great, but let's do it this way. Okay, so by this time, we have set an appointment and we are sitting down to have the listing, or to have the buyer consultation. Okay, so I've brought a number of slides from Chartmasters that will show some of the things that I think are most critical when working with a buyer. Really what I'm trying to do is help them understand how to be successful. So there's a couple of slides in Chartmasters, and I can I'll try to reference them, and I'll try to do a better job of putting those slides, like, to make it really, really obvious which ones I like, but there's only 2 or 3, so it should be pretty easy. Okay, so I've prepared for this buyer presentation by going into Chartmasters and making sure that I have the most updated data for the type of property that I suspect they're gonna want. Okay, so by this time I know why they're moving. I know when they want to move by. I have a rough idea of what their financial situation is with respect to the loan. Okay. And more than likely, they have spoken to a lender at this time. Okay. There was a question in the chat yesterday, by the way. Let me just address that really quick. Somebody was asking about estimated closing cost. So I did post in the WhatsApp yesterday. I think I posted in the help community a estimated closing cost worksheet that Kathy Vitale put together, and that was earlier this year. So it's, obviously still pretty accurate. It's all estimated though. There's so many factors that go into what closing costs are. Number 1 is the buyer's credit score, the buyer's loan type, how much down payment it is. There are some fixed costs that are associated with, like, title search and attorney's fees and doc recording fees and that kind of stuff. That would be the case no matter what type of property they buy or how expensive it is or what type of loan they obtain. There's also a closing cost involved. That is generally paying the lender for their efforts, running title, organizing all the closing documents, recording all the closing documents, and some generalized fees with respect to title insurance. There's generally title insurance for the owner, which is optional, but incredibly highly recommended. Please just tell your buyer to get title insurance, and lender title insurance, where if there's a loan, there is going to be a requirement that they get lender title insurance. Okay. If I was to be forced to put a percentage on it, I'd probably say you're probably looking at somewhere around 2 to 3% of the sales price is roughly what the closing cost will be. However, again, there's a lot of factors, and closing costs are also going to include, in a general sense, something called escrows. So the establishment of the escrow accounts. Okay. In short, the establishment of the escrow accounts are include the following things. They're going to include 1 year of prepaid homeowners insurance. Okay. And they're going to include enough money to pay the tax bill when it's due. So I don't want to go into a ton of detail on this, but it also depends on the time of year. So for example, if let's say the tax bill is due November 15th and you closed last week, you basically had to put an entire year's worth of taxes in the escrow account. So when the bill is due in a couple of weeks, they'd have enough money to pay the full amount. If you close in a month and a half, let's say in the middle or end of December, after that tax bill has already been paid, then for the next close to a year, you're going to be submitting your monthly payment, and it's going to be rebuilding up that tax account within the escrows. So in almost a year, 10 or 11 months, there'll be plenty of money in there to pay the bill. So the escrows do depend on when the closing is in relation to when the tax bill is due. Okay. For every day that the new owner owns it, they're going to be paying taxes. And for every day that the old owner owned it, they're going to be paying taxes. So at some point in the future, we can talk a little bit about prorations, but that's the generalized idea. They also require generally a 2 to 3 month cushion for taxes to make sure that the escrow accounts don't run low. I'll give you an example. I have an investment property, and the tax bill ended up being a little higher than they were expecting, and a lot higher than I was expecting. And the good news is that's because the property has a value, increased value, right? But they ended up paying the full tax bill, which was a good decent amount more than I had in the escrow account. So they sent me a bill for like $900. They're like, either pay this now or we're going to increase your monthly payment by, it was like $100 or a little over $100, so that I can settle everything up. So in short, the lender should be having that conversation with the buyer. Okay. I prefer a document called the loan worksheet, or what my lender in the past has called the loan worksheet. And that is basically an estimate of closing cost and escrows based on a rough number of the tax amount. So for example, in most counties in Metro Atlanta, you're looking at probably somewhere between 1% and 1.25% of the value of the home in annual taxes. So if your buyer's buying let's say a $400,000 home, the tax bill is probably going to be somewhere between $4,000 and $5,000. Okay, it's probably a rough number. So they can go in, and the lender should be able to put together a little worksheet for you so that you know how much closing costs are going to be due. So you can either prep your buyer to bring that amount of money, or you can ask the seller to pay a portion of it or potentially all of it. Okay. If the lender is, this is going to sound really harsh. If the lender doesn't want to put that worksheet for you together, they're done. They're fired, in my opinion. Okay. I'm in charge. I'm choreographing this entire thing. And if you don't want to play within the rules that I'm setting up, you don't get to be on the team. Okay. Kathy with Shelter is more than happy to put together a report like that. And if you get any pushback from any lender, that is the first indication they're not the right teammate for you. Make sense? Okay, very good. Now, so by this time, my buyer has a rough idea of the type of loan he's going to get or she's going to get, and the type of down payment that they have to put together. So much like our seller pre-qualification questions, when we take those questions on the phone and kind of the intake call, we're going to sit down with the buyer and we're going to review those with the buyer. Okay, so let's go. Let's see how this goes. Kathy, you want to be my buyer?
I will.
Okay, everyone can still hear me, right? Kathy just froze. Can everyone still hear me?
Yes.
All right, beautiful.
Yes.
So let's actually let me add one more idea to this. I'm going to recommend to you guys that you do this in a professional preset setting. Okay, either the office or a Starbucks or somewhere in public. Particularly if you've never met this buyer before, do not meet them in a vacant house, okay, for safety concerns. Meet them in a public place, and if they're resistant to that, you really have to decide if that's something you want to do. Okay, I've been involved in several occasions, all as team leaders, where our team leader, when the buyer basically said, hey, I am a little nervous about this. We looked them up, and they just got out on bail for like sex charges. Okay, so oh well, I've got lots of money in the bank and I want to buy this $1 million house, and you're like, oh my gosh, $1 million buyer, I'll do whatever you want, right? Yeah, but that's not every person is an opportunity, like we've discussed, right? So we're gonna meet, and in a professional place. And we're going to sit down, and I'm going to tell Kathy, I'm going to say, Kathy, thank you so much for the opportunity to visit with you. It's truly an honor to work with every buyer that I work with, and I'm very, very grateful for the opportunity to sit down with you today. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay. So let's pretend that it's Kathy and Carrie, her husband. Okay. And let's just pretend that my intake call was with just Kathy. Okay. So I've got all this information, but we kind of need to bring Carrie up to speed too. So I'm going to say, so Carrie and Kathy, I've got a couple of questions for you to make sure that I understand exactly your motivations for buying a home, and so that I can explain the fine details of the entire process. Would that be okay with you?
Yes.
Okay, great. So let's start off with just discussing a little bit about the process for you. So tell me, when you think through the next couple of months, as we're going to go through the all the kind of excitement and stress of a real estate transaction, can you think together, what is the most important thing that can happen in this transaction, so that when it's done, you'll say, oh my gosh, I felt so calm and so protected, and I had a lot of fun. What would need to happen in our relationship for you to be able to say that?
I just want it to be as easy as possible, because we've got a lot of stuff in this house, and I was hoping that you would, help us find the house, get it under contract as quickly as possible, and then you could provide us with vendors to take care of getting everything there, because I've moved too many times, and this is the last move. So I want it to be as easy as possible. I don't want to do any packing. I want your vendors. I just want it to be easy, Bill.
Great. So Kathy, what I hear you saying is, number one, this is going to be your final house. That's super exciting. And I don't know if you've had some bad experiences with vendors before, but please understand, I've been in the business for many, many years. I know some bad ones, and good news is I also know some good ones. So whether it is a packing company or moving company, appliance repair people, landscapers, painters, whatever it is, we've got numerous people that I can connect you with, and oftentimes we're able to get a great rate because of my relationship with them. So good news, that's one less thing you have to worry about.
Okay.
So
That's
outside of
important.
it being as stress-free and pain-free as possible, and it being a series of easy buttons, what else is important to you about the buying process?
Um, I don't want to look at too many houses.
I love you.
Yeah, I want to look at a few houses. I've identified neighborhoods that I want to be in, but I don't want to look at a lot of houses.
Okay. So, a lot of houses means different things to different people. What does a lot of houses mean to you?
More than 6.
So what I hear you saying is that once we get to 6 homes, you want to have found the home you're looking for.
Correct.
That's awesome, because Kathy, in my experience, generally the buyers of the homes, that when I help a buyer buy a home, we're looking at about 6 to 8 homes before we make a decision. So I'll be really good with you guys, and we'll keep it to 6. Does that sound good?
Yes.
Now, the reason why I can say that confidently, just so you know, is really twofold. Number one is, I'm going to ask you a lot of questions and go into a lot of detail with you about what you're looking for. So for example, you might say, I want a open floor plan, or I want a big backyard. And if you say that to some agents, it might be a little difficult to put that into the search criteria. And so they could bring you to a bunch of homes that don't really work for you guys. And so my job is, and I do this every single day, is review the market. I study the homes in the market. And if I have to take you to more than 6 or 7 homes, one of two things is happening. It's because I either haven't asked you enough questions or gone into enough detail about what that specifically means to you, or it's an indication that I haven't done my job properly, right? Meaning I haven't previewed the properties, or I haven't asked the right questions of the listing agent. So I want you to feel confident that I'm going to take the extra time so that I don't take you to homes that aren't going to be a good match for you. Does that sound fair?
It does.
Beautiful. Okay. is there anything else that you can think of in the buying process that we haven't spoken about that's super important to you guys? Maybe anything about communication? Do you have any preferences on how we communicate?
Text. I love texting.
Okay, so texting is the way to go for you guys. Is that
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Okay, so I repeated what she said, which is clear evidence that I'm listening. I voiced how important it was for me too, and then I gave her the confidence that she was going to get this process was going to go her way. Make sense?
Yes.
Okay, so Carrie and Kathy, or Carrie, Kathy and I got an opportunity last night to review some preliminary questions that I had for her, and I'd just like to take a couple minutes to review those together with you. Would that be okay?
Yes. He said yes.
He said yes. Beautiful. Is he standing right there?
He said, yeah, he's right there on the other side of the table.
Awesome. Okay, wonderful. So let's just review these together. So Kathy mentioned that you guys are looking to move into your last home, and she said that your desire was to be in this home before the end of the year. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And she said that you guys were able to purchase before you sold, so that shouldn't be much of a complication. Did I understand that correct?
Yes. That's what we want to do.
Okay. And she said that you're looking for a home with 6 bedrooms, a finished basement. You'd like to be in a community with a swim and tennis so that the grandkids can come over and go swimming and we can all learn tennis together. She said that you wanted lots of windows in the home so you could have lots of natural light, and you wanted a study for your side business. Is that correct, guys?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Is there anything else that maybe I forgot to mention, or maybe Kathy forgot to mention? Would you say that's a pretty accurate review of the type of property you guys are looking for?
That's exactly what we're looking for.
Okay, great. So just in an effort of time, I'd probably ask a couple more questions just to get a little bit more of an idea of, kind of get them thinking about being in that home. Not only thinking about being in that home, but also when they think about being in that home and they verbalize it, and I'm the one asking the questions, they connect the two in their brain. So subconsciously what's happening is that they believe, and this is completely valid, obviously, but they believe that when they experience that in their new home, it's going to happen through my involvement because I'm the one asking the questions. Does that make sense?
Yes.
All right, beautiful. So Kathy, tell me a little bit about, or Kathy and Carrie, thank you for sharing about the new home. I mean, gosh, that sounds exciting, to have the grandkids and the family come over and, spend time swimming and playing in the big backyard. That sounds awesome. I can just see that happening right now.
We're excited.
Let's move on to talk a little bit about the market. Tell me a little bit about what you know about the market right now. What's your understanding of the marketplace right now?
There aren't as many houses as there usually are, and so when we find a house, I don't want to delay. Carrie might want to think about it longer than I think about it. I'm impulsive, and he's very analytical, right, Carrie? So I don't want to delay. So that's what concerns me.
I got to tell you, Kathy, it sounds like you've been a realtor before. You got all the good answers.
You know what?
Right?
You run into people who have been a realtor before, and you got to be prepared. And you can tell. This happened to me recently. I said, "Are you a realtor?" And she said, "No, but I was."
Yeah, exactly. So you want to keep a professional, obviously professional tone throughout the conversation, but there's nothing wrong, in my opinion, with getting them to smile, right? Like cracking a joke like that, obviously completely appropriate and all that stuff, no cuss words and that. But if there's any tension in the room, sometimes it kind of goes completely away once they start smiling and laughing. You see what I'm saying? Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, I agree. So what do you think that means? That means that we're gonna have to, once we see what we like, there's a good chance we're gonna have to move pretty quickly. Is that your understanding?
Yes, that's my understanding. And I really I want to see what's out there. Like one weekend. I want to see what's there and make a decision. And Carrie's okay with that, but he doesn't like looking at houses very much either. But I'm afraid something will hit the market and we'll see it, and then he'll delay analyzing everything, and I won't get it. I won't get the house.
Okay, great. So what I hear you guys saying is you'd like to kind of pack all those 6 homes or less than 6 homes into a weekend.
Yes.
And you would like me to be super prepared with, comparables and maybe even have the contract pre-written so that very quickly we can just stick the address on there and put the final details about closing date and price and closing costs and that kind of stuff and send it off so we can take advantage of and so we can win in this market. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yes. And
okay. And I'll do even one. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I think having that time for an inspection will make him feel better. That like we can get make an offer on a house, right? Make an offer on a house, and then we can. Then he still has time to analyze it during. If we go under contract quickly, he still has time in his head to analyze it. And I just want him to feel okay with that. That's correct?
Yeah, you're actually like 3 steps ahead of me. I was just about to go in that direction. So the good news, Kathy, is I'm going to go one step further. And because I know y'all's particular situation, with a desire to just see a couple of homes and to see the best stuff on the market, and and you're willing to take advantage of the right opportunity quickly, I'm going to go a step further. I don't always do this for buyers, but I'm more than happy to do it for you guys, is to take the time to go and preview these properties beforehand. Okay, that way we make sure that we're super efficient with our time. Does that sound fair?
Yes, that's great.
Okay, now I really liked your idea from before, because let me just take a quick minute to explain some contingencies with respect to the contract, and it echoes a lot of what you just said. So typically there's 3 contingencies in the contract. Okay, the first contingency is going to be what's called a due diligence period. Okay, generally speaking, you're looking at probably about 7 days on the low end, about 12 days on the high end. And that is your opportunity to secure the property, right? So the buyer and seller have come to terms. Okay, no one else can interfere with that. And that gives you as the buyer an opportunity to, continue to think about it, to hire a home inspector, radon inspection, termite inspection, structural engineer, contractor, whatever you want to do to evaluate this property to make sure it's in the condition that you'd like it to be in. That is your time. Okay. The due diligence period, as a matter of fact, it allows you to leave the contract for any reason, not just inspection related, should you find something or something happens where you decide this is not the home you want to pursue. So for example, if you were to find a better home, or Carrie wakes up in the middle of the night and says that home's not for me, all we simply have to do is sign one piece of paper and we withdraw ourselves from the contract, and there's no penalty. Now, of course, we're not going to be able to get any type of inspection, money back that we might have paid an inspector, but you'll be able to get your earnest money back.
Okay.
Fair?
Yes.
Okay. So as you mentioned before, I know how important it is for you to rely on somebody else's recommendation for vendors. I've got a list of home inspectors and they're fantastic, and we'll bring them into the fold as well.
Okay.
Okay. So if we find something during one of the inspections that is problematic for you, then you have the opportunity again to leave the contract without question, without explanation, and without any hassle, and of course no fee. Or what most often happens is you would submit what's a document called the amendment to address concerns with the property, and obviously I'll walk you through this. But that's your opportunity to say, okay, we've identified some wood rot in that corner and we want the proper contractor to come and fix that. Okay, the toilet's not working properly. We want a plumber to come and evaluate that and make any replacements or repairs. Okay, we have a HVAC system that's really dirty and doesn't, temperature differential between the hot and the cold is not within the recommended number. And so we'd like that to be serviced and any repairs or requests or replacement to be made. And we want all receipts of all this work to be furnished to us a couple days before closing. So these are not unusual requests. However, particularly in this type of market, more than likely, you're not going to be able to cut and paste the inspection report and basically just say, fix it all. Okay, we're probably going to have to stick to the major things. And the major things, in my opinion, are health related and safety related and system related. Okay, does that
Okay.
sound fair?
Yeah, that's fair.
So in a strong seller's market, as a matter of fact, we've got 1.25 months of supply right now. In a balanced market, Kathy and Carrie, as you know from being a realtor in your past life, is somewhere between 6 and 7 months. Okay, so if we identify wood rot on the house, it's probably not something the seller is going to tend to. But like I said, I got a lot of people in my world that can fix wood rot, so you don't have to worry 1 second about that. Okay. So as I said, the due diligence period is generally around 7 to 12 days, calendar days. Okay. Now, simultaneously, what's happening is we have the binding contract and we send it off to the closing attorney so they can begin their work. We send it off to your lender so they can open your file and begin their work. And there's 2 other contingencies that are in the contract. Okay. The first is called a financing contingency. This is an opportunity for the lender to continue to compile all the information they need from you. So please make sure you're completely organized with your tax returns and your pay stubs and your bank account, balances and all that kind of stuff. They're going to ask you a lot of questions. So please understand that since you're bringing 5% to the closing and the lender is bringing the other 95% to the closing, don't be surprised if they ask you a lot of questions because they've got 18 times the risk that you do. Does that make sense?
Yes, it definitely does.
Okay. Wonderful. So they're going to underwrite the home and you to make sure that they believe this is a good investment, or I'm sorry, that they believe that that financially speaking, that this is an acceptable amount of risk for them to write a check for over $400,000. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Generally, that time period is between about 21 and 25 days, generally closer to 21 in this market. Okay. So we might start asking for a few extra days, but understand that it can probably be done within 21 days. What we're trying to do is make sure that the file can go through underwriting and that we can get a conditional approval with conditions that are simple to satisfy. Okay. Now, simultaneously, the home needs to be appraised. Okay. Now, I tend to take a very strategic approach with the appraisal. In an ideal world, I want to give enough time for the end of the due diligence period to occur and us to resolve any inspection related issues before we pay money for the appraisal and begin that process. Okay. So typically, if I can negotiate the numbers properly, that should be no problem. Now, if the appraisal, and I'll explain that why in just a second. So if we get the appraisal, one of three things is going to happen. Either the home will appraise at or above the list or the contract price. If that's the case, then we move forward, no issues. Okay. If the appraisal comes in lower than the contract sales price, now that's simply one person's opinion of value on that day. So that doesn't mean that you're getting a good deal or a bad deal. It's just a tool that the lender uses to justify the sales price. Okay. Now, let's say we're under contract for 400,000 and the appraisal comes in at 390. Okay. If the appraisal comes in at 390, then we would go to the seller and say, hey, we love the home. We'd love to buy it, but the lender won't let us pay more than 390 for it. So we'd like for you to lower the price to 390. And if the seller agrees, then you're obligated to buy the home at 390. Okay. If the seller says no, and as long as this happened within the right amount of days, which I'll certainly be counting for you, okay, then you can remove yourself from the contract. The other option is for you to bring the difference. So if the home is particularly important to you, or you don't care what the appraisal says, you believe it's worth 400 and you want to buy it, then let's say in your situation, you would bring 5% of the 390. The lender would give you 95% of the 390, and then you would bring the difference to make up to the 400. So you'd bring an extra $10,000 to closing. Do you feel like you understand that process?
Yes. So yes, absolutely. So if the seller's not going to lower the price to 390, but we've invested our heart in the house, then if we want to pay that extra 10,000, we will do that, or we can terminate and get our earnest money back.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. By the way, earnest money is it is negotiable, but it is generally around 1% of the sales price. So
Okay.
since we're going to be buying a home in the roughly $400,000 neighborhood, I would recommend that you have roughly $4,000 in an account. Go ahead and get it there now so that you could write a check from that account when we find that home for you on that weekend together. Fair?
Okay. Yes, that's good.
Can I ask a
Okay.
question? I'm so
Yeah.
sorry.
Go ahead.
So if she was approved for whatever amount that the bank is going to lend her, and then the appraisal came in low, aren't you approved based on, I guess, your debt to income ratio of
So that's not
whatever?
so there's two ideas kind of working side by side. So I think you're mixing them. Let me make sure that you're clear on it. So the underwriter is doing two things. They're approving you, and then they're approving the house. Okay. So your approval, the buyer's approval, is yes, it's based on credit score and income and debts and ratios and all that kind of stuff. So presumably the lender was cool with loaning you up to 400. The problem is they don't believe the house is worth 400. So there's two sets of evaluations. There's the evaluation of the buyer, which presumably they've already checked out. Then they have to evaluate the house to make
Okay.
sure that they believe the financials of the house are appropriate. Does that make sense?
It does, but when you're
So the
coming up with
appraisal
this
is for the
extra,
property.
say that again,
The appraisal is for the property. If the appraisal comes in low, it's not a critique of the borrower, it's a critique of the
of the
property.
property.
Now, the lender is just determining, let's say she absolutely maxed out at 400, like she could not go to 401. Okay, so the lender is still comfortable issuing the loan for 390. And just because she would now be required to bring an extra 10 grand to the table, that the lender doesn't really care about that. They're comfortable with their issue of the 390 loan. They don't really care. Now they need to know that you got the money from, they're probably going to want a gift letter or source that extra $10,000,
Okay.
right, to make sure you didn't rob a bank to get it or something. But
Hey, y'all.
they wouldn't have a problem with that.
Bill, it's
Yeah.
9:14. I've got to get
Yeah.
out of here. I've got to get to my closing. So somebody needs to be the buyer.
All right, Ebony,
Ebony, you're the buyer.
Kathy, it's going to be such a pleasure working together. All you got to do is sign this.
Okay.
Thank you.
The buyer brokerage agreement. Bye.
That's right. All right, bye, Kathy. Okay, so let's try to wrap this up quickly. So now I've explained the due diligence, I've explained the financing contingency, and I've explained the appraisal contingency. Now, the truth of the matter is there's kind of a blend between, like, if the person's a dud and they don't want to work with me, then truthfully, I don't want to spend 20 minutes explaining all this stuff to them.
Mm-hmm.
However, there's a side effect that comes with explaining all this stuff to them. There's really kind of two. Number one is it's proof that I can explain it, right? And they feel comfortable working with somebody who's got that ability, right? And I've been dropping in little sprinkles of protection in there and some allusions to us working together, right? I'm using words they and we and together and that kind of stuff, so that they are, I studied a lot of psychology, and guys, this business is like 99% psychology anyway. Okay, so there's a lot. That's why we talked about the importance of language, right? So we are throughout this explanation, we're forming a relationship, we're building rapport. They're feeling more and more comfortable with me, right? Because I've identified what the main things in their world are, and I've relieved any of their concerns as I'm explaining. Okay, well, you don't have to worry about inspection related issues because we've got a protection in the contract for that. Okay. Now, Kathy was already pretty good about, like, I don't want to see a bunch of homes and that kind of stuff. But the one slide that I think is critical for a buyer to see right now is the slide that says, what percentage of homes are selling at or above list price in the market? Okay. And Chartmasters has that slide broken out by price. Okay. So we're in the $400,000 neighborhood. If I remember correctly, that stat is somewhere around like 30 or 35% or so. Okay. So Ebony, I just want to share one more slide. Like, you seem to have a really good pulse of the market, and I appreciate you taking the time to study that. Okay. I wanted to share this one slide with you. And because this is really evidence of what you have seen and heard in the marketplace, is for homes in the price range that we're going to be pursuing, about 35% of those properties are selling at list price or above list price. What do you think about that? You're the buyer, Ebony, remember?
It's not great for me.
Well, look, I mean, you need to buy, right? You told me you want to buy before the end of the year. So, I don't see a drastic change happening anytime soon. So it's not that it's not good for you. We're just helping you be successful. So if I were to find a property for you and take you to it, and you walk inside and you ultimately find that you have to pay more than list price to buy the home, how would you feel about that? Would you be comfortable with that?
I would have to be, because if that home was something that I wanted and it was going to give me the lifestyle, my family, the lifestyle that I wanted, it's worth
Y'all are
it.
so nice, man. Not every buyer is this nice, y'all. Okay, Ebony, I agree. That's wonderful. Now, remember, that doesn't mean you're going to overpay for the home. You're still going to have the protections that we discussed. So we're going to verify that the lender believes that the home is worth whatever we agree to pay. It just means that there's a good likelihood that when we find a home that we like, we're not going to be the only ones that like it.
Mhm.
And we're probably going to have to be pretty assertive and aggressive with our offer to be successful. So you're willing to do that with me, right?
Yes, for the right home.
Beautiful. I wouldn't want you to do it for the wrong home, that's for sure. All right, wonderful. Do you have any questions?
No, I think you've done a wonderful job with explaining everything.
Great. So let's do this. What I'd love to do is next we're going to huddle with the lender. And based on what we talked about today, we have a little bit better of idea of the price range that we're going to be looking at and the down payment that we're going to have. And I'd probably ask a few more questions about the down payment, and I'd probably run through the list of some additional questions that Kathy and I talked about, right? So, what's important about that to you, and ultimately when you have a home with a swim and tennis community and a finished backyard or finished basement and a studio for your work, Carrie, what does that do for your family, right? I get them really,
Thinking,
it like borders on cheesiness, but you got to go there, trust me.
okay. I do
Okay.
have a question.
Hang on
So,
one sec.
okay.
One sec, Ebony. So so the next thing we want to do is huddle with the lender. So we'll have a really good idea of the closing costs that are going to be involved in a likely sale for you. So like you suggested, when we identify that property, we don't have to then go huddle with the lender. We've already gotten that stuff taken care of, and we can be super aggressive. I'm going to have my team go ahead and pre-write the contract like I promised. So all we have to do is drop in the property specific information, and we can very, very quickly get the offer out.
Okay.
And what I'd like for you to do is to download my mobile app so you can begin searching for homes as well. Now, remember, anything that you find on the open market, whether it's on my site or my app or some other website or driving around or whatever it is, these are homes that I can help you pursue. So all
Okay.
you have to do is identify the home and then call me or text me and let me know this is a home you want more information about or you'd like to see. The other good news is the way that representation works is that I'm ultimately compensated by the owner of the property that you pursue, which means that I don't just show you my listings or show you my office's listings or something like that. It makes absolutely no difference who the listing brokerage is or the listing agent is of the property that we pursue. We have a cooperating agreement that I'll be compensated by that person. The great news from that is I don't have to be a salesman, so to speak, right? You're never
Mhm.
going to see me pressuring you to buy a particular property. If it's not right for you, then let's get back in the car and let's go find a
No.
different one. Okay. My job is more of a consultant. So what you're going to see as we're showing homes together is I'm actually going to be spending more time pointing out the negative stuff I see than the positive stuff I see. Meaning, like, I don't have to walk you into a kitchen and say, look at this dishwasher. It's the best dishwasher in Alpharetta. Have you ever seen a dishwasher this pretty? You're not going to hear that from me. You're going to hear me say, hey, look at that stucco. This is synthetic stucco, and here's some problems with synthetic stucco. Or hey, don't forget, look to see what's going on, with this erosion in the backyard. Let's make sure we're aware of that, and we have somebody look at that. That's an expert in this type of stuff. So you're going to see me talk a lot about the negative so that we can really make the best decision for you and your family. Does that sound great?
It sounds amazing. It sounds like you're on my side.
Absolutely.
So, okay.
Absolutely. So one last thing is I brought you a copy of a document called the buyer brokerage agreement. Is basically a loyalty agreement, and it also has its place in Georgia license law. So the way that this works is today you're my customer, and according to license law, customers, the Georgia State Commission basically says that I can only perform ministerial tasks for you. Ministerial tasks are things that I could use my hands and my feet for. For a lack of a better way to put it, it's stuff that you could probably do yourself, right? What school district is the house in? How long has it been listed? How large is it? When was it last sold for? How long has it been on the market? These kind of questions. Okay, if you'd like me to use my brain and really develop a strategy with you together to be successful, then ultimately you're going to need to be my client. And that means that I have a loyalty relationship with you and vice versa. Okay. So what I'd like for you to do is read through this document. I don't expect you to sign it today. Read through this document and let me know if you have any questions. Okay. It can be terminated by me or you at any time with no penalty. So I want to give you the confidence to know that if you think everything is going to go great, next week I upset you and you want to part ways, no big deal. Okay. But this allows me to work for you and you to cooperate with me so we can do this together. So next time I see you, I'll ask if you have any questions about the buyer brokerage agreement. Does that sound fair?
That sounds fair.
All right, beautiful. All right, and then I'd probably part ways. All right, my phone's about to die. Ebony, go quick with your question, please.
Okay, so as far as the contingencies, you have the contingency for due diligence, 7 to 10 days. After that, you have the amendments to address concerns. You have the
No. Hold on. Amendment to address concerns is not a contingency. It's the way you resolve the due diligence
the due
period.
diligence. Say that again.
And all the time periods, it's the way you resolve the due diligence period. So if you identify any issues within the due diligence period, right, then you resolve it with the amendment to address concerns. So we'll spend a little bit more time on that in a future class. But all the time periods, remember, are happening simultaneously. So as the 10 days of due diligence are happening, that's also the first 10 days of the financing contingency.
Okay.
Right. By the way, one thing that I mentioned earlier that I didn't close up was this idea of finishing the negotiations on the amendment to address concerns before I order the appraisal. Sometimes what happens if an agent isn't strategic about this is they could send off an amendment to address concerns that says, hey, I want this fixed, this fixed, this fixed, this fixed. And then that afternoon, they get a call from the appraiser saying, hey, we'd like to appraise the property tomorrow afternoon. If I was a seller or the seller's agent, I would say, well, damn, I guess they don't need this stuff fixed because they just dropped another $400 into the transaction, right? Yeah. So I'd say to myself, well, we're not going to say yes to this stuff because they obviously want to move forward. You see what I'm saying? So everything you say and everything you do not say can or will be used against you. Do you see what I'm saying?
I do. Like, so jumping the gun too quick with the appraisal, you kind of lose your leverage.
I wouldn't say you kind of lose your leverage. I'd say you absolutely
you do. Okay. Okay.
There's a time period that allows you, if you set it up properly, to not have to jump the gun. Right? Everything you do has strategy involved. Everything. The negotiations start from the minute you call that person and say, I'd like to come and see the home. Because if you're an ass on the phone, no one's going to want to work with you. Okay? I mean, I probably have 10 agents around town, probably more than that I could call and be like, hey, my buyer wants your home. I'm sure you're going to have multiple offers. Just tell me what I need to put on there so we win. And they're like, oh my gosh, I was hoping you'd call. I love working with you. All you got to do is give me 400 and no closing costs. Let's see it closing. You see what I'm saying?
I think we lost him there. I think he may have run out of.
He's out of juice.
Yeah, I think so. So.
Okay.
We'll call it.
Have a good day, guys.
All right, you too.
Bye,
all right, bye.
Bye.